Awesome. So I see that our meeting is being live streamed, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So welcome, everyone. My name is Steve David, he, him. I serve as the Advocacy Director at the Ohio State University College of Social Work. And it's my pleasure to be the MC for today's Lunch and Learn from the Bench, A Day in a Life. So as you all know, April is Second Chance Month, and this week, the last week of April, is Reentry Week. So we're really grateful to have a really unique conversation that we're going to bring to you all today. This is an opportunity to hear from our judges about the immense responsibility that they carry with their work, and also what it's like to do that and get a real perspective as to what's happening from behind the bench and some of the thought processes that go into this responsibility and this obligation that they have to our community. So really grateful to the folks at the Franklin County Office of Justice and Policy Programs for pulling together this excellent panel, and grateful to all of you who are tuning in on Facebook today to watch. We will be keeping an eye on the chat in Facebook, so if you have questions for this group as we move along, please do interact with us there and drop your questions in the chat over there, and we'll try and direct those to the judges, but have a really exciting conversation coming up for you all. So please do visit reentry.franklincountyohio.gov and the Central Ohio Restored Citizens Collaborative website for more information on upcoming events that's happening all this week. There's a lot of great stuff going on. So today we have the privilege of having this community conversation with Franklin County, Ohio Court Common Pleas judges Cheryl K. Munson, Jiza N. Page, Karen Held Phipps, and Administrative Judge Stephen McIntosh should be joining us shortly. And I'll be handing it off to our moderator today, who's Morgan Bomer Gwynn. Morgan has worked for the Franklin County Government Center for over 10 years, including 7 years with the Juvenile Empowerment Program and 3 as the Director of Volunteers at Volunteers of Court-Appointed Special Advocates, or the CASA program. So Morgan has a ton of experience in this space, and I couldn't think of a better person to be holding with our judges. And I'll hand it over to her to kick it off. Thanks so much, Morgan.
Thank you, Steve. And hello, judges, and thank you for joining us today. Our hope for today is to have a meaningful conversation and Q&A with you to learn more about what you do as judges and how you work. We get to have more insight into how judges approach their work, what impact it has on our communities, and get to know you more as fellow members of our communities as well. So good afternoon, justices or judges, and thank you for joining us during Reentry Week 2023. Can we start by having you introduce yourself and tell us how long you've served in Franklin County, why you became a judge, and what specialty programs you've run, supported, or are working on as your time as judge? Thank you. And I'm going to hand that off to Judge Munson.
Oh, great. Thank you. Good afternoon. First of all, thank you so much for including me in this conversation. I love that it's Second Chance Month and particularly Reentry Week, because, you know, reentry is without a doubt one of the most critical phases that justice-involved individuals face, you know, so that we can hopefully set them up for success as they rejoin the community. I have been on the bench since 2020, so I'm the least senior here among the judges. Prior to that, I was a Franklin County public defender for 26 years. So I was a career public defender. I began as a law clerk in 1993 when I was a law student at Ohio State, and then joined the office as an attorney in 94 as soon as I graduated and passed the bar. And then ran again, as I indicated, in 2020, and was gratefully successful in that race. I would say the reason that I joined the bench is I loved my work as a public defender. You know, I believed in that advocacy, but I also thought that as a public defender, having served, you know, marginalized and underserved populations throughout my career, that was an important perspective to bring to the bench. Not that our other judges don't have, obviously, similar perspectives, but again, as the only former public defender on the bench, I just thought it was important, you know, to put that piece to complete, where we really want a diverse bench, a broad perspectives. And so I thought that was important. So joined the bench in 20, and one of the things I initiated right away was the desire to start a mental health docket. We've had a substance use disorder docket here in Common Pleas Court for about 18 years, originally started by the now Justice Jennifer Bruner and now presided over by Judge Stephen McIntosh, but no other specialty dockets. And I thought it was important, as well as all the other judges certainly agree, that we have a large population of folks in the courthouse that are justice involved due to mental health issues. And there's very little wiggle room in the law for them. If they're competent, unless they're not guilty by reason of insanity, and that is almost zero folks percentage-wise that come through, there wasn't really a special place for them. Our probation department, of course, has a mental health docket track, and they do amazing work. But the RISE docket, which is my docket, Reaching Individual Success Every Day, is a docket where my fellow judges, if they have somebody who is, again, justice involved, moderate to high risk, they're struggling on probation, and they continue to reoffend, and this judge, along with defense counsels, the state, and probation, do not want to incarcerate this person in a state institution or the jail because they realize that individual is there due to untreated mental illness, then they can make a referral to my docket, and then we bring those people in. So my docket's really more of a prison diversion docket for people with mental health issues, and it's been very successful. I have about 30 people. They're phasing up, they're doing amazing things, and I'm really grateful for the support that I've received from my fellow judges in starting and working on that docket. So that's a little bit about me.
Excellent. Thank you, Judge. And same question for Judge Page. And the question again in total is, tell us about why you became a judge, what specialty programs have you supported, run, or are working on, and how long have you served in Franklin County? Thank you, Judge Page.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for hosting this afternoon or lunch and learn panel, as well as for inviting me. Again, my name is Jiza Page, and I have been on the bench since January of 2019. I wanted to become a judge because I was a practicing attorney, and also I was a member of Columbus City Council. And in many ways, holding those two positions, I was able to see the importance of what happens in the courthouse and how it impacts our community. And I decided that I wanted to really get back into the courtroom, be able to be there full time, and decided to run for judge. As far as some of the programs that I support, one is the Youth of Incarcerated Parents, which is in collaboration with Justice Policy and Programs. And so what we do here, judges in our court, is that we will ask any defendants who are going to be incarcerated, whether that's in a state institution or locally, if they have any children, and that information is given to a individual who works for the county who is sitting in our courtroom. And so they are able to reach out to the primary caregiver for any of those children and to provide any type of resources from rent subsidy all the way to whatever the children may need while their parent is incarcerated. We've seen a lot of success so far. I've had a defendant who was in the jail just express his gratitude for his rent being paid and allowing his girlfriend to remain in their apartment while he was incarcerated. So that's one program that Judge Munson and I are currently participating in as pilot courtrooms, and hope to expand to other judges as the program grows. And then additionally, with the support of our colleagues, we are starting, and for the first year, we'll have an in-person youth summer camp that we're all really excited about. And it's really to provide young people in our community with access to judges, and we will kind of operate as professors too, which will be interesting, but we'll see how that goes. But to really begin allowing our next generation to learn more about the legal system, to learn about the criminal side, to learn about the civil side, and hopefully to become future lawyers and judges. So that's all about me, and I look forward to the additional questions.
Thank you so much, Judge Page, and that's very, very interesting about that. Judge Phipps, the whole question again is, how long have you served in Franklin County? Why did you become a judge? And what programs have you run or been in support of as your time as judge? Thank you again, Judge Phipps.
Thank you, and thank everyone for being here and taking their lunch hour to learn and grow, because we all need to do it every day. So I appreciate everyone's attention. I came to the bench at the same time as Judge Page in January of 2019. I wanted to be a judge. My story is a little more complicated. As a child, I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s, and I realized that there were a lot of inequities. And my personal burden was coming from a family with 15 siblings, with 11 girls and 5 boys. Somehow things were very dispiriting at home. And not to complain about my parents, that's not what I'm here to do, but I noticed at a young age that there were a lot of inequities. And so when I thought about what am I going to do when I grow up, I want to help make the world be more fair. And so in my limited knowledge as a child, that was to be a judge, because that's their job, to make the world fair. And so that's where I first got my passion for the law as a child. And so I grew up, and life takes you on many paths. And I ended up being a 20-some-year-old single mother of 2, and had not finished my education yet, and decided, okay, it's time. So I went back to school and finished my undergrad, finished law school while my kids were in grade school as a single mom, and practiced for 15 years doing criminal defense. I was a business finance major. I thought I would go right into business finance because I'm really good at math and I understand those things. And then I realized those people, one, weren't very nice to one another. And I wasn't doing anything to help society, nothing. So I then quickly transferred my interest into doing criminal defense, like Judge Munson, and worked with indigent people from a private attorney standpoint. And after 15 years of doing that, I felt I had the experience that I could bring to the bench. So that's how I got to where I am. And while I've been on the bench, I have supported my other judges in anything I can do to volunteer to help. But I've also been on several Supreme Court committees that are helping to change the judiciary as a whole. Some of it is quite boring and about the civil end of the world, which a lot of people know that people's mortgages are getting foreclosed on. And I've been on a committee where we're working through how to help people not lose their homes once that situation gets to the court. And any opportunity I can to speak to the public and help people understand what we really do here is one of my key roles. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Phipps, and thank you to all 3 judges who weighed in on that. Those were some excellent answers and lots of diversity in your background as well. And Judge McIntosh will be joining us momentarily, and so I will give him a couple minutes to get settled. But I haven't, these are open questions. I'd like a couple judges to weigh in on each one. But the first one to kick us off is, what role do you believe judges play in the community? And welcome again, Judge McIntosh. Good to see you.
I'll start with answering that one. What role do I feel that all of us on the Common Pleas Court play in the community? There's so many things that we do. One, role models. We are public servants, and we are all here to set a role model for just being a good person, being a good, listening to people, advocate. That was our biggest, I think, from all of us that practiced, the biggest problem when you come to the bench is you're used to talking and advocating, and now you have to put on a listening hat. And so I feel our role in the community is to get out and help people understand and invite people in to see what is happening. I know all of us have had many classrooms come. I just had an 8th grader shadow me last week. I am open to host people just to help people understand what we do here and what the process is, because what you see on TV and the news is not really what we do.
And I'll just say briefly, one thing, I love about the makeup of our bench is that in addition to all of us bringing in, the youth or other people to shadow or going out to educate the community about what we do, our bench tends to be very active just in volunteering in the community, helping in the community, because I think we all share, and these are my words, but I know my colleagues well enough to know that their heart is in the same place, that you can't really sit and make decisions about people's lives unless you know where those folks are coming from and the challenges that they're facing on a daily basis. So I think that's why it's so important for judges to be in the community and to remain in touch with the people that are coming through the courthouse doors, so that you never lose sight of the challenges and the obstacles and the struggles that exist for some of the folks that come in front of us.
And going back to our last question for Judge McIntosh, and welcome again. We kicked off opening this session by asking each judge, how long have you served in Franklin County? Why did you become a judge? And what specialty programs have you run, supported, or are working on in your time as judge? And welcome again.
Thank you very much, and I apologize for being late. I've been on the bench now. This is my 17th year that I've had the opportunity to serve. For as long as I was practicing, being a judge was not something that I had thought seriously about, but after a while, I thought that I had some value that I could add to the bench. And so I decided at some point in time that this was some place where I thought I could make the biggest difference in the criminal justice system. And so that's the reason why I say all the time, one of the reasons why I enjoy this job is because every day I do have an opportunity to make a difference in someone's life. Obviously, that doesn't happen every day, but how many people actually have a job where they have that opportunity to do so? And so I've been fortunate enough now for approximately 10 years to be our drug court judge, which is the TIES program. Treatment is essential to success, and find that extremely rewarding because you really get to know the individuals and the participants that are in the program, get a real good sense of the challenges that they have, not just the drug challenges, but the life challenges that they have. And so being able to work with them weekly to help them develop the skills that they need to stay out of the system is something that I have found extremely rewarding.
Thank you, Judge. And I'm going to have a follow-up question in a little while about that program. And so we are having two judges weigh in on each question, Judge McIntosh. And so if there is something that really speaks to you, please feel free to answer it, but there's no set order. In making decisions, what are some factors you considering when balancing community safety needs with rehabilitation or incarceration alternatives?
Well, I'll go first then. What I like to do is get as much information as I can from as many sources as I can. Because, one of the things that we have to evaluate in making decisions, particularly on more serious offenses, is looking at recidivism factors. What's the likelihood that this person is going to continue to offend once you place them out in the community? Now, the good thing is a lot of the people that we deal with, while yes, they're committing offenses, they're committing lower level offenses. But when we're getting to the one where people are hurting other people, that's when it's, you're trying to understand what's the likelihood of this person having continued interaction with the person that was harmed, obviously family member, friends, or other factors such as that. So for me, at least, it's extremely important to sort of take my time, get as much information as I can, and then hopefully make the best decision that I can with the information that I have. And in looking at all those factors, obviously it starts from sort of what a support systems they have in the community to what sort of criminal history that they have. And then trying to figure out, okay, do we have programming that might be helpful if I were to make the decision to keep this person in the community, or based upon past action, unfortunately, a community solution is not the most appropriate one.
Thank you, Judge McIntosh. Do any other judges have any reflections on that question?
I will just add briefly, considering everything that Judge McIntosh said to you. And then, so we take those things to consideration and we look at each individual individually. And so one sentence for someone, it may not fit the next person. And I think that we have a lot of tools here, particularly in Franklin County, that allow us to have a very individualized sentence, whether that is a term of community supervision or a term of incarceration, that allows us to address, I mean, kind of like the needs of the case in a sense. But that's just one thing that I wanted to add. It's just really the individuality of it.
And I would just like to add one thought that has come more to the forefront in the last few years is with the gun violence in our community. I am also very worried about the young people who come before me who are repeatedly caught with a firearm, because yes, they may be carrying those guns for protection purposes, but we all know that the reality is the more people in situations with guns, the more likely someone's going to get hurt. And I have had several mothers in the back of the courtroom crying and thanking me for telling their son, you're going to sit in jail for a little while longer because we need to get you in a better mindset. Because the more often you carry a gun, the more likely she's going to be at a funeral. And so it's not just the general public. I don't want our young people being hurt either. And so that's a big change from when I was practicing to when I took this bench. Is I have a lot of concern for the safety of our youth.
Thank you, judges, for your input. We know that the impact that justice involvement can have on a young adult's life. How can young people who have been through the justice system rebuild their lives and move forward in a positive direction? And I think that that's a very good space after what Judge Phipps just said.
Yeah, I'll say, and this is not solely limited to young people, but I think particularly relevant for young people, that if they're in those situations, for instance, that Judge McIntosh mentioned when they have victimized someone else, or as Judge Phipps mentioned, they're repeatedly in a situation with a firearm and do not appreciate the dangerousness of that. And then they end up being incarcerated because of the seriousness of the crime, or it could be very well mandatory time, because of course in Ohio, if you commit a crime with a gun, there is a mandatory sentence attached to that. And so some of these young people are being incarcerated. And again, I'm not limiting just young people, but one thing I would like to say is I'm a big believer in the judicial release system, that somebody is incarcerated, and judicial release is a mechanism by which a judge can put that person, take them out of prison early and put them on community control supervision. And if I can do that, if they've done well in the institution, they've stayed out of trouble, they've taken advantage of programming, I like to do that when I can, because then you have a tighter supervision structure for them. And so, if I have someone on judicial release, they're always, I kind of run it a little bit like a specialty docket, and that they have to come in, every 30 or 60 or 90 days and check in with me. So I have eyes on them, and we're having candid conversations about how is reentry going? Do you have the tools necessary? Do we need a higher level of supervision? Do we need to put you into the CBCF program to make you succeed? And again, as Judge Page said, you can really create this individual kind of plan of action for them. And, prior to becoming a judge, of course, I practiced for years, and I always had the honor of practicing in front of Judge McIntosh. And one thing that I always loved that he did, and that I do even outside of my specialty docket, is people that are on community control, judicial release, probation, or otherwise, I bring them in for miscellaneous hearings. It's something that he always did. And I always just thought, that level of accountability, when you have a judge saying, it's not just your probation officer, you're coming to look your judge in the eye and have a conversation about how you're doing. First of all, that tells them that somebody cares about them, and it also allows you to see how they're performing. So with my younger probationers or coming in out of prison or just on probation, I bring them in to see me on a very regular basis.
And if I could just add, because I think one of the things, particularly with young people, that we need to be able to help them see is that they have alternatives. I mean, unfortunately, so many of them in the environments in which they're coming up don't see a future for themselves. And so if we can provide them tools that can give them those alternatives, then I think we're helping them. So towards the point that Judge Munson was making, I think when we engage, we as judges engage with young people and let them know that we actually care about their future. I think with some, it absolutely makes a difference with them, that we're willing to work with them and hopefully giving them some tools so that they don't think that the only course that they have in life is to follow those around them that are engaging in criminal activity and criminal behavior.
And if I could chime in too before we go to the next question, we all frequently see applications to seal records as well as applications for certifications of qualified employment. And so those are two avenues. Unfortunately, you have to have a conviction, and there are only certain convictions that can be sealed, and there are certain employment opportunities by which a CQE would be helpful. But those are also two things that can help an individual get back on track. I mean, sealing the record can really just give you a totally fresh new start. And the CQE allows an individual to be licensed in certain areas. And that I've seen people who work for Columbus City Schools, who work for the State Department of Developmental Disabilities, who have a negative history on their background, but who are then able to go on and to obtain employment and to continue on a positive path moving forward. And we also will waive those fees for anyone who is indigent and is not able to pay. I think it's like $50 for the application, but if they're not able to pay that, then there's a waiver that you can file with the court as well.
Thank you, all of you. Those are some very critical things that you talked about. And to expand on the last question a little bit, what do you think can be done to improve the justice system for young adults? And we can also expand that out to just adults.
I think I'll start. I think that there are a lot of things going on that the courts are doing already. That probation, when I first started, was basically just another policing agency, which doesn't help people from becoming reoffenders. We all know that wasn't working. And so our probation department has, a community control department has really stepped up their game. And if I place somebody on probation, I tell them the probation officer is your helper. And you won't get in trouble for being honest with your probation officer. I mean, unless you say, I just shot somebody. Obviously, we're talking about, I'm struggling, I can't get a job, or I started using again. I'm clear with them when I put them on probation that if you're honest, you're not going to be punished. So be honest and ask for help, because the probation department has quite a bit to offer in regard to connecting people with services, as long as you articulate what you need. So I think that we're fortunate with as big as we are. We have resources maybe smaller counties don't have. So I would say that one big improvement could be that all probation departments transition to this line of thinking where we're not just policing somebody, we're actually trying to help someone be successful. Because, you know, sometimes I tell a young kid, the first time felon, I hope I never see you again, but that's because then you never got in trouble and you were successful. And I give them motivational things like, if you complete your first year of probation without any problems, probation can terminate and you can be done. But, you know, this is up to you, how hard you work. So I think that Franklin County is getting a good grip on that. There's always room for improvement, but if the smaller counties could maybe learn a little bit from us, I think that would be helpful for the future.
Any other judges want to weigh in on this?
Well, I can add one thing that I have started doing. There was an article, it was about a year ago, and I keep it here on my desk. And it talks about young people who were convicted of stealing cars, whether in juvenile or, 18 or 19, which they would then be before a court. And then how there unfortunately seemed to be a path where either they were victims of or suspects in homicides. And so I have had individuals who have like F4, the lower level, receiving stolen properties, which is typically like with the vehicles. I actually asked them and their attorney if they can read this article before I move forward with sentencing. And I've had young people in my courtroom who know the individuals who were either victims of homicides or who were charged with them because they all kind of hung around together. And so I asked them to think about that. And if the decisions that they're thinking now, when it may seem fun to steal someone's car and to have a joyride, like, is that leading you, unfortunately, in a path where there could be a lot more serious consequences that could impact your family? So that's something I tried to do. I found the article to be pretty insightful. No, it's not across the board that everyone who steals a car is going to be involved in more serious offenses. But when they're younger, I just want them to start thinking about the value of life and hopefully not returning to our courthouse.
I just wanted to say also quickly, not in our court, but of course, before they come to common pleas, a lot of, folks, they're coming from juvenile or they've been involved next door municipal court for misdemeanors. And one amazing thing that's going on next door municipal court is Judge Jessica DeVarga has started what's called Up Court. And that is misdemeanor offenders between the ages of 18 and 24 move to her docket. Because of course we know, that the prefrontal cortex is not developed for them and they're still very young, though legally adults. And so she's providing some intensive early intervention at the misdemeanor level for those young people, which I think is a brilliant idea. So I think that's just another example of early intervention, opportunities that are available.
And to switch it up, if you had any superpower, what would it be? We're going to go with a lighthearted one.
Well, I'm going to go for broke. If I had a superpower, I would actually want it to be able to help people understand how their actions impact other people. And I think that just speaks for itself. I mean, I might be out of a job. I might be out of a job if I could do that, but I think that that would be the best one to have.
Yep, probably reading people's minds so that I can figure out how they're thinking and maybe provide them some better guidance as well. You know, because sometimes folks that come in front of us really do want to change. They just don't have the tools to do so. And so we're trying to help them. But then there are a lot of folks that come in front of us that just lie to us about what they really want to do. And being able to discern and maybe provide them some additional resources, guidance, or wisdom would be helpful.
I was thinking along the same lines of Judge McIntosh. I'm an X-Men fan, and Professor Xavier is able to read people's minds. But to not copy his answer, I would maybe add just the power to heal people. So whether that's like a physical hurt or even something that's mental that we can't see.
And I would just agree. I mean, those are all, you know, all amazing things. We all have the same mission and the goal. I might add maybe the power to be in more than one place at a time, just because there are so many opportunities to, you know, Judge McIntosh, for example, you know, wanted to join us, but of course he has a docket at the same time. And so he had to fulfill that role, but he still wants to be here talking to people. And so being able to be in more than one place at a time might be good.
The X-Men is also near and dear to my heart, so I love hearing these answers. Thank you, Judge Page, for, you know, just putting Professor X out there. It's you know, either the Professor X or the Magneto conundrum. And so going back to our set questions, what steps are taken to ensure that the public has confidence in the integrity of the justice system, particularly in light of recent controversies and criticisms of the legal system?
I'll say and first of all, it's very difficult because often, you know, you're making decisions and people are getting their information in bits and pieces about what you did through the media or social media. And making, you know, second guessing your judgment and making assumptions about what you did and why you did it without knowing, you know, they're not able to be, you know, in the room hearing those decisions, or they're not there. And so, of course, you get a lot of criticism. That is not to say that there aren't reasons that people, you know, have criticisms of the system. But one thing that we do here in Franklin County Common Pleas Court is, for instance, we all have the option of live streaming our trials and contested hearings, and those links can be placed directly on our web pages, so that I know anytime that I have a trial, the link goes up, and I let, you know, participants know, you know, the victim side, defendant side, everybody, so that people that can't make it down to the courthouse can tune in and watch the trial from start to finish, can see at least the evidence presented, and to hear, you know, what people are doing or saying. I think that gives them a little more understanding maybe of what's happening, so they don't, you know, if you want to criticize something that I do, I want you obviously to do that, and I would certainly take it to heart, but I want you to have all the information before you make that criticism. So I think transparency, you know, getting people in the courthouse, seeing what's going on, live streaming, just making the doors to the courthouse open and transparent so people can have all the information, you know, to draw their own conclusions about what's happening down here.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we all should be doing is making sure that the person or the people that we're dealing with on today, that we're treating them the way that they should be treated, that we're giving them opportunities to be heard. Because hopefully, if they walk out of the courtroom with nothing more feeling like the system worked for them, then we at least have someone that has faith, because I absolutely agree with you. Trust in the judicial system probably is at an all-time low, just because of everything that's been happening and what's been going on. And I agree with Judge Munson. It would be wonderful if everyone could come down and actually see what happens every day, to be more informed in making the decisions or the things that they're saying. But at least I know one thing that I can do is those that come in front of me each and every day, treating them the way that they should be treated, and dealing with their issues and letting them know that as the judge, I mean, I have a legitimate interest in their case, and I don't see them as just one more case that I need to get off my docket, that I want to give their case the kind of time that it deserves, so that hopefully as they leave the courtroom or if they're heading out to prison, they feel that the system at least was fair with them.
And I just want to chime in and say that is so true, because I can tell you from the defense counsel perspective, and Judge Phipps probably encountered this too, that if you went into court and even if the client came out with what's not necessarily a positive result in his or her mind, for instance, they're going to be incarcerated or whatever, if they felt like the process was fair, that the judge was fair, the judge was impartial, the judge was respectful and compassionate, they could so much more easily accept that decision and say, well, that's what it is. I did the crime. I had my, my day in court, so to speak, and this is what happened. It's when they felt unheard or dismissed or rushed, or as Judge McIntosh said, just considered, just another case to move along the docket. That's when confidence, really becomes significantly lower.
And I would just like to add that sometimes people don't understand how much pressure we as judges are under, and how many terrible, terrible things we see in a day. And for those of us who are invested in making sure everyone is treated as an individual, you carry a lot home with you every day. And so what someone sees in a split second, they may not understand, one, that they don't know half of what we know or half of what's talked about in court. And so part of it is we ourselves need some of the compassion that we don't receive, that we're trying to work extra hard to make sure everyone feels compassion, because as a criminal defense attorney, there were so many trials that I did that people would be like, oh, I can't believe you represented them. And my response was always, you mean someone with constitutional rights, and someone who's a human being, and someone who deserves to have someone listen to them? And when you're dealing with someone who's doing something so bad that they're going to be in prison possibly the rest of their life, they should go there knowing someone had their back. Somebody was listening to the words that were coming out of their mouth and cared enough to do a good job for them. And that is something that everyone, all the judges here that you can see, do daily. And it is what some of the general public just needs to understand is we're working really hard to accomplish a lot. And possibly if people could cut us a break sometimes and maybe ask a few questions before they rush to judgment, that might be helpful.
And the last thing that I would just add to my colleagues' comments is just really the diversity of our bench here in Franklin County. So, I mean, we still have some progress to make, but we sit on a court of 17 judges. I was trying to count in my head. I believe 7 of us are women. We have 3 judges of color. We span about 2 to 3 decades, just in age. We have very different backgrounds personally and professionally. And I think as a whole, we are trying to do the best that we can to help dispel some of the myths and even the negative experiences that people have had with the justice system through our diverse thinking and the diversity on the court.
Thank you, all 4 of you, for weighing in on that. And I was also struck by something that Judge Munson and Judge McIntosh were saying just about transparency. And I've noticed that the tools that we used for accessibility at the beginning of the pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic, and the end of the pandemic are still the same tools that we use for transparency. And so that accessibility that we needed to kind of leap forward with in 2020 and make sure that all of our courts were set up with this, that has then continued to become moving from accessibility to transparency. And so I'm glad that that has continued and that that's still an ongoing tool that's in your judicial tool belt. And a question for especially judges who may be working with a specialized population on a specialty docket. How do you handle cases where the defendant is mentally ill or has a substance abuse problem? Can you talk more about that?
Well, I'll start at least with the individuals that have substance issues, and probably 80% of the folks that I deal with in the ties court have some level of mental illness as well, but Judge Munson deals with those with the much more extreme. But you know, it's amazing the folks that at least I get an opportunity to work with in the drug court, because most of them, you know, just regular people that unfortunately, because of circumstance or because of medication that they were taking, ended up being addicted. And unfortunately, over an extended period of time, in some cases 10 to 15 years, have dealt with the addiction. And kind of to my point earlier, part of what I need to do is to at least have them see a vision of a different life. With specialty dockets, there's a lot of structure and a lot of interaction with the court. So I have many opportunities to have conversations with them, and that's, you know, when possible, I'm the biggest cheerleader, which many of them appreciate, but also I'm their harshest critic when they're not doing the things that they need to do. And so we can have some honest conversations about that. But that's the reason why I think these dockets work, is because of the amount of time and attention. And so people in my specialty docket, when they're coming into the program, you know, may have never had a job or been able to hold a job, but by the time they graduate, they're working and doing well. May have lost their children for custody. By the time they've gotten through our program, have regained custody of their children. And so many of them will tell me as they are moving towards the graduation of their program that they have so much more to lose now, which is one of the reasons why they have made a decision that they don't want to use anymore, because they may have gained the trust of their family, who no longer trusted them to even be around them anymore. And so it really is us spending time, and hopefully with the professionals, our treatment teams that we have, figuring out what works for this person and giving them hope and a future that many of them did not think that they still had available to them.
And certainly, I mean, I would echo everything that Judge McIntosh just said, though my specialty docket, you know, population is, you know, to come in, they have to have a serious mental health diagnosis, but of course they also have co-occurring substance use disorders often. So like Judge McIntosh, you know, we're running dual tracks sometimes. You know, the one thing I want to say about the folks on my specialty docket, and I would also, you know, point out that Judge Page and Judge Phipps deal with, you know, mental health cases and substance use disordered individuals on their dockets day in and day out as well. So, you know, they also have strategies. But on the specialty docket, which is just, you know, mental health justice involved individuals, so many of these folks are coming from generational trauma, you know, that is it the result of, mental illness within the family, or has the trauma, led to some of their mental health issues, to the point that we know that trauma and stress, reprograms your brain. I mean, it changes the neurological pathways. But we know that the best way to counter that is one of the best strategies is to celebrate every success that they have. And so many, you have folks that, what might be no big deal to you or I, I navigated the Dakota bus system to get to court today. And we applaud that. And that's the first time maybe, particularly in some folks coming from more dysfunctional family structures, that anyone has ever celebrated anything that they've done or said good job or whatever. And every time you celebrate success, you make a dent in the neurology and the pathway that has been negative and depressed, and it brightens up and like, as Judge McIntosh says, creates that spark of hope, so that they can reprogram their thinking to not always expect failure, to not always expect the worst, but to begin to see that there are positive potential outcomes. And so then they're motivated to reach for those outcomes.
Thank you, judges. I'm struck by the resiliency building as we use ACEs so much in our abuse, neglect, dependency, and delinquency system, and how that's also translating over to the adult side. And to wrap up today's Lunch and Learn, we do have a question that came in from the Facebook chat that I would like any judge that is comfortable to weigh in on this one. Is, can you share anything about a case that deeply impacted you personally? What were some of the circumstances and how did you handle it duty-wise and personally?
Well, I would have to say each of us probably have had a number of cases that have impacted us. But I can tell you in general language that often there is an unfortunate victim, whether they're a family member that's been abused or there's someone who's been harmed, physically by a stranger. There's two sides to every story. And part of what our job is to understand and listen to what the victim or the victim's family wants to share, but I also have to balance that with the individual that caused the harm, because there's always a story there too. And so recently I had a young person in front of me who is going to go to prison because they drove drunk and they got on the highway and went in the wrong direction and killed somebody. And so I'm standing in judgment and I'm listening to the family members explain how their loved one was the one you could call at 2 a.m. and he would get out of bed and drive you home. And he was so against drunk drivers. And he's driving home from setting up his band for his sister's wedding reception and gets killed on the highway by a drunk driver. And nothing's going to fill that gap. Nothing can fill the gap in the pain they feel. But on the defendant's side, that young individual only had one speeding ticket, and they were like 29 years old. So absolutely zero criminal history, zero college educated, good job. And they just made a terrible, terrible decision. And those cases where something terrible happens, but I can see that a human being is standing before me and is going to have to now live their life knowing they killed somebody and be sober while they do it. I clearly can see that. And every time, it's so much easier when there's just a terrible person who's on the defendant's side, who has been given chance after chance after chance, and they don't care about human life. those people are so much easier to deal with. I can tell you that all of us, when we are listening to a family talk about the loss of a loved one and someone who, just made a mistake but is going to go to prison, that affects us, and for obvious reasons. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for sharing that, Judge Phipps.
I had a young African-American male that was on supervision to me, and worked with him, kept picking up cases, worked with him, kept picking up cases. And so it got to the point where I had to send him to prison. And it just so happened that I was visiting Noble Prison. That's where he was at. And it just hurt my heart because he then introduced me to his two brothers that were in prison with him as well. And he was a nice kid, just couldn't figure things out. Well, when he got out of prison, one of the first things that he did was he stopped by my courtroom just to let me know that he was doing well and that he was going to change his life. And I was familiar with his pastor, and his pastor was keeping in contact with me, letting me know how well he was doing. And after being out, I think for maybe about a year and a half, he was shot and killed after after turning his life around. But unfortunately, because of the neighborhood that he was living in, and I don't know all the full circumstances, but that had a real impact on me. At the point in time where he began to figure this thing out and started doing all the things that he could do in trying to help others not to follow his path, tragedy struck. And that was hard for me. And so kind of still remains with me.
And slightly on a little off topic of that, in terms of things impacting you personally, you have to be careful, obviously, when you're making decisions on a case, because sometimes, quite frankly, something that somebody did, you listen to and it just makes you angry that they did this, they victimized this person, or they did this or that, and you never want to make your decisions, from a place of anger, because then you're not weighing the sentencing factors that we have to take in, so for me, if something strikes me that way, personally, and that I feel a level of shock or offense, which, takes kind of a lot given, the work that I've done and what we do here on the bench. But when that happens, if I have a sentencing set and that's my, my knee-jerk reaction, I will continue that sentencing like a month and say, I need to walk away from this and come back and do my job objectively because I'm angry and I should not make a decision from that place of anger.
Excellent point, Judge, balancing, our personal feelings with how we are taking something personally. And do any other judges have any reflections on this question?
I think I'm the only one who didn't speak, but I would just say, I know we're getting close to the end of the lunch hour, is that we see a lot of good people who unfortunately make very bad decisions. And it could be one day that they made it, or over a course of a period of time due to substance abuse or not handling their mental health concerns properly. And so, we try to weigh that, because the individual who stands before us could be our neighbor. It could be someone who we go to church with, or the victim could be someone who, is very similar to a family member of ours. And so, just understanding that we don't take any of that for granted. We don't look at everyone before us as they're this terrible person and we can't wait to impose a prison sentence, but we are trying to do what we are required within the bounds of the law. And again, to really make an individualized sentence that best fits that person in that situation before us.
Thank you for sending us off, Judge Page, with those final thoughts. And I'm going to pass it back over to Steve to finish out today's lunch and learn. But thank you, judges, for coming today, for being here, and for answering all of these questions so fully, honestly, and compassionately.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Morgan. And thanks so much to Judges McIntosh, Munson, Page, and Phipps for your time today. We really appreciate you all. For those watching, please do visit the Reentry Week schedule for the other amazing events that are coming up this week. I did also hear what sounded like an open invitation to reach out to these judges and learn about what they're doing. So if you're following along today, please do feel free to connect with these folks or connect with Morgan and I, and we can do our best to put you in touch. But just want to wish everyone a good Reentry Week, and hopefully you can connect with some of this other impactful programming, and we hope that we see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you so much.